introduce what Usomi is as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is it on?
Yes, all good. It's not it's just a recording.
Okay. That's nice. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Denis Mijibi. I'm CEO of a startup called Usomi Limited. And Usomi is a company that's trying to link farmers to technologies that maximize productivity. Okay. But I also do my research at the Nelson Mandela University in Tanzania. I'm a senior research fellow there. And really what Usomi is trying to do is to bring science into smallholder farming. And today I'm going to share with you one or two things we're doing, trying to do that. So I'll focus more on the application side. You're data people, and so I'll not focus too much on the data side, so on the application side. Just a little background to the problem we are trying to sort out. Everybody knows that there's a challenge with food production. You know, the population increase. Every year about 80 million people are added to the human population, to the global population. And so by 2050, it is estimated that we are going to have 2.5 more billion people. And we're not doing a good job at producing the food, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. We have problems with producing enough food. Now, it is estimated by 2050, this problem is going to be compounded because of reached peak soil. The soil, in terms of fertility, the soils are deteriorating. If you look at the soil fertility map across the world, the soils are degraded a lot. And the population pressure is not helping things much, because now we have so many more people that we need to be able to feed. Africa is contributing a great deal of the population that is going to increase these 2.5 billion more people who are coming. Now, if you look at availability of water, water is becoming a very limiting resource. A lot of aquifers which have been used for irrigation have actually dried up in many, many places. And then water stress in places like Cape Town, places like California, is actually putting a peak to what people can do with irrigation. Okay, so there's a problem with water management, and to compound that, as if that is not enough, certain places in the world have reached peak yield. They cannot produce anymore. You go to the States, you go to India, you go to Japan, they have reached peak. They cannot increase productivity beyond what they have. So in places like Japan, for example, the rice yields cannot be increased anymore. So we've reached a plateau. And so in terms of food production, people are looking at places where this food can be produced. And where do you look? You look at the place where the Green Revolution never happened, here in Africa. So we are looking to Africa to actually help produce this extra food, 70% more food that we need. Unfortunately, the way things are, it looks like that is going to be a daunting challenge for us to actually accomplish. For example, a study that has been done here in Kenya that has looked at the changes, you know, in the way food production or farming systems have evolved over time, has shown that areas good for production, for agriculture, arable land is actually shrinking. So if you look at from the 60s up to now, you can see that the area of production is actually shrinking. So we had the whole of this area in the 60s, good for agriculture, and the light green was surplus areas. But as we've progressed, this has shrunk and projected to maybe up to 2030 or 2050, you're going to have very little spots where you have land that is very good for agriculture. So there's a problem, right? And in a place like Kenya, our land use management is actually very bad because people are uprooting coffee plantations and putting real estate. So very little land that you need to produce food, we are mismanaging it, putting houses and things like that. So there's a problem. And so these are the things which have informed us, as you saw me, to try and find or set ourselves up to respond to some of these challenges. How is the world responding to this challenge of a shortage of food? The first thing is that Africa has the land, which is unfarmed. So people are moving in. If you cannot use a resource, people use it. So multinationals are buying up a lot of farmland in Africa, okay? And this is expanding monocultures. And monocultures are bad for agriculture. Monocultures is bad news for agriculture. When we talk about monoculture, we're talking about huge plantations of maize, huge plantations of single crops. Not good for the soil. So if you look at that and look at certain African countries, a place like Liberia, all the arable land is in the hands of multinational corporations which have bought it up. So the question then becomes, what are the smallholder farmers doing? How are people producing the food? What does that mean to food sovereignty? There's a problem there. You know that majority of Africa, most of the food, up to 80% of the food is produced by smallholder farmers. So if all the land is going to monocultures, probably corn or soya, what happens to the food? Where do the people get the food? They have to import. And there goes your food sovereignty. So there's a problem. Many countries are facing this problem. And this is something that we need to stem if we are going to maintain our food sovereignty. Yes, sir. Right.
What are those percentages? 71%,
It's just talking about the arable land, what percentage of the arable land has been sold off. Yeah? What percentage of the arable land has been sold off to people coming in, corporations basically, who want to farm.
So Sweden is using almost half of Tanzania's land.
Yeah, so basically about 18% of Tanzania's arable land has been sold off, and of that 18%, 45% of that 18 is being bought by Sweden, right? Yeah, so that's what it means. So this is a picture which basically says that the ability of Africa to feed itself is gone. Because if a foreign corporation is going to come and buy up all the land, they're not producing for you. They're producing to export and sell out, right? So you'll see a lot of countries in West Africa, for example, are importing a lot of food. Nigeria subsists on European milk, right? On European tea and things like that. So these are the things which are causing a problem. Now, how have African countries responded to this challenge? Most of them have responded by doing this, extending their hands, begging, right? A lot of food aid coming through and things like that. So there's a problem. African heads of states sat somewhere, Malabo, and declared, by 2025, we'll have halved the hunger in Africa. It hasn't even moved an inch. Then we are seeing some countries coming up with subsidy programs. So Nigeria has had a very successful subsidy program where the government has de-risked lending so that farmers could access inputs. But it is so disconnected. There is no strategy to it. It is piecemeal solutions going on. And finally, if you look at the level of undernourishment, it has really moved very little in Africa. Yeah, it has, since 2000 up to now, almost 2 decades, the gap has shortened, yes, but not even 10%. other regions of the world have done better. So what does this really mean? What do we need to fix this? We need a systems approach to fix this. We can't do only one thing and leave the other. We have to take a comprehensive systems approach. And if you look at it clearly, I've enumerated some of these things. You will see these are the ingredients that led to the Green Revolution that started in Mexico and then moved to India and Pakistan. That is not what we are doing right. So these things, we are not doing them together as a system, and that's why we have the problem that we can't feed ourselves. We have to import a lot of food. The common denominator for all those things is data. The common denominator is data. If you can't see it, you can't fix it. If you don't know the deficit, you can't address it. If you went to any African Minister of Agriculture and asked them, how much hybrid seed do we need for our food need this year? I bet 90% of them will not tell you, because they don't have the data for it. If you ask them, what is the soil fertility, what is the soil health outlook for a specific region? So in Nyeri County here where we are, if you went to the person in charge of agriculture and say, what is the soil health outlook for this area? They will not tell you because they don't have data for it. And so data then plays a central role for us to be able to fix the agricultural problem. So let me illustrate that. Yeah? So I've worked a lot in dairy systems. I've done a lot of my research in dairy systems. And a lot of farmers buy animals based on the phenotype. So I'll assume you guys are farmers. If somebody presented you with these two animals, which one will you buy? If on the first of it, so you have this, somebody's selling you the animals and say, hey, buy one. Which one between these two will you buy? The black one. This one. How many say this one? Let's do a poll. Well, this is all you have. This is all the information you have. So how many will say number 2? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. About 15 people. How many will say Ngobe? So majority of us will say Ngobe. Why is that? It's standing straight. It's looking good. So imagine I gave you some additional information. I told you, actually, these two cows, that one is 73% Holstein Friesian. This is 77% Holstein Friesian. Which one will you buy now? Ngobe. You'll still buy Ngobe, because those percentages don't look very different.
Because I'm worried about weak European cows. I want a strong African cow.
You want a strong... Yeah, but the genotypes is the same. They actually have the same genotype. But if I gave you this other piece of information, now which one will you buy? It's very obvious, right?
But
so
it depends on resistance to disease, right?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't depend on resistance to disease, because the phenotype is an expression of that resistance to the disease. The fact that this animal can produce 11 liters in this environment, it means it is adapted to that environment to produce at that level. So it's actually expressing that resistance without really, so inherently it is expressing that resistance to disease, right? Data is everything. There is a lot of in this example, for example, a lot of dairy animals die young because they're not resistant to the diseases. So there's a lot of filtering that happens. So an animal that survives to this level, it is resistant. It is adapted to that to some extent. Okay, data is everything, but in the agricultural system, we don't have the data. We don't have the data for anything. So if you want to do predictions, you cannot predict anything because you don't have sufficient data to calibrate your models. You don't have sufficient data to do any prediction. So this is the thing we are trying to do. We are trying to correct that anomaly. We are trying to harvest enough data to allow us to start doing predictions. So in the case of the cow, for me to predict the best bulls in the system, I need sufficient data with pedigree information available so that I can predict the best bulls that will perform in the environment. If I'm talking about the crops that will do well, I need sufficient data to be able to know which phenotype, which genotype, and based on the genotype-environment interaction, which ones do I need to be able to perform better and use them as the base for my breeding program. We don't have data for that. So what we've done is we've come up with some software which we're encouraging farmers, smallholder farmers, to collect data so that we can use that to do certain predictions. And the predictions we are focusing on really are yield for now, because you cannot pontificate and talk to a hungry person. So somebody has to be full first before you can start talking to them about quality and all these things. So we want to focus first on yield, maximizing production and profitability for smallholder enterprises. And then once we have that sorted, then we can go to the nutrition and all those things, right? Now, when you go to many conferences, people will argue, no, these things have to go hand in hand. Nutrition and quantity have to go. But I disagree. So what we've done, we've come up with a solution called Usome Lulu. Usome Lulu does three things. Number one, it is a marketplace where farmers can buy farm inputs, because getting farm inputs is a big problem for smallholder farmers. They will be waiting for government fertilizer, which comes 1 month after the rains have started, right? They will be waiting for hybrid seed, which they don't get on time. And even if the seed is available, it doesn't get to the villages. So what we've done is to set up a one-stop shop where farmers can get these inputs and they are delivered to them. The second thing that happens is that the extension system is broken. The ratio of extension officers to farmers is so bad. It's even worse than the ratio of doctors to patients, which is very big. It is almost something like 1 to 30,000. Yeah? And that doesn't help farmers get new technologies, new management, best management practices. So these e-extension things are not ideal, but they are a stopgap measure to help farmers at least get some information. So we have some sort of e-extension module to it, but we don't want just to keep on sending SMSs to farmers. This is how you grow tomatoes. This is how you do this. It has to be a bit more intelligent. So what we've done is we relate it to the physiological cycle of the animal, to the cropping cycle of the crop, so that if you were to go onto the tool, you will be required to give some information which calibrates a specific calendar that is activated. Then you get information that is tailored to you. So it is customer-centric. It is specific to the customer. It is not generic. Then the last thing it does is benchmarking, right? It benchmarks. It basically compares a farmer with other farmers. It compares the performance of an animal with other animals, and then tracks that performance across time, so that if, based on certain standards, the performance is not as required or as projected, it sends alerts to the farmer to say, hey, the performance of your animal is not as is required, is not as expected on standard. So this is an interface of the tool. So we're doing that in poultry, livestock, and crops. Right now, the tool is being used mostly for poultry data collection in Tanzania and Nigeria. That's where we are using it mostly to collect data. We've just started with some farmers in Nyeri, a few middle, these are not small scale. The dairy part, they have to pay for it. So we started with middle level farmers here in Nyeri. They are doing the livestock, mostly on the dairy farm. The crops component, we have not started collecting data on it, because we are still collecting standards, data on standards, expected yields, and things like that to put in there for calibration. We have the market, and then the calendar is a place where you go. It gives you a schedule of what needs to happen when. So if it is a certain crop you need to fertilize, you need to spray, you just go to the calendar. It tells you in 2 days' time you expected to do this and that. That information is also available through SMS. As you can see, I've just put some screenshots. I'll try and connect to the tool if I can. So once you have registered, say in this case it is poultry, it gives you a bit of summary of your flock ID. It generates a unique flock ID for your birds, gives you how many birds you have, and a small summary of what the flock looks like. We need location data, because what we are doing is we are trying to harvest weather data, and instead of sending weather data to the farmer, as most tools do, they tell you it's going to rain today, we use that data to calibrate the messages that the farmer gets. So we don't send weather data to the farmer, but we use geolocation to calibrate what recommendations we give to the farmer. We have analytics, so you can get instant real-time feedback on the performance, benchmarked, and then you can see on history whatever data you've given in. If you press the record button for any specific flock, for poultry, these are the things you can record, right? So this is our way of trying to harvest as much data as we can to be able to predict performance and things like that for animals. Now, we have another tool which farmers prefer more than this one, because collecting data in smallholder systems is a problem. It's a headache. We are struggling on a daily basis to be able to actually get data. And then this requires then that as a business you have to have boots on the ground. The app won't do it. Just having a shiny app or whatever won't do it. You must have a field force. And that's where some of these things become difficult to sustain, because you need somebody to make sure some data is flowing, right? To go and remind farmers, put in data, to help those farmers who cannot use a system like that. Even though our tool is accessible on USSD, there is a conceptual framework within yourself you need to have to be able to actually go through with this. So we need people to be able to do this. Yes?
I have a question. How have farmers taken this? Are they warming up to it? Especially thinking that as much as it's available on USSD, it's an Android app, and most of the people around, in terms of using the app, there might be this issue. Have you guys found it difficult to really convince this farmer that, you know what, as much as this thing is good, it's easy to use?
Yeah, I would say that it is not very easy to use, right? And farmers are warming up to it very slowly, right? We've started, and before I did this, we did one when I was still at ILRI that was very simple. That was purely USSD, and farmers really took it up very well. But there's a plateau. You only get a specific type of farmer to actually give you data, which is okay, because at the end of the day, you don't need all the farmers recording data. You just need a segment of farmers. It's a sampling thing. It's a statistical approach. If you're taking a statistical approach, you only need a small proportion of the farmers to give you data for you to be able to generalize. Sorry? Yeah, we do benchmarking, and you need from our models. If I have about 5,000 farmers, I can benchmark for 1 million. Yeah, if I have 5,000 farmers, I can benchmark for 1 million. Right now, we are on to about 3,000 farmers. The people we are working with for the poultry, we are targeting about 1 million farmers. The program we are working within, targeting 1 million farmers. We want only about 3,000 to 5,000. We are good with that. We don't want more than that. Then it becomes unwieldy. Okay? So just to finish, we have a market tool that farmers are excited about, because it solves the problem of farmer access to market. And so when we talk to farmer about our approach, where we have a virtual aggregation platform that shows where farmers have produce and then aggregates the small quantities and puts it on an auction, farmers are happy with that, because it reduces the ownership chain, right, between them and the consumer, and therefore they get more money. They're excited about that. So what we are doing is saying, if you want to be on this market platform, you have to give us data to predict how much you're going to get for us to sell it for you. So that's how we are driving adoption of this. So just to finish, I think our tool is very amenable for use by many people, and we are targeting different groups for different reasons, because for us, it is not making money for us. We're just spending money. We're just spending money, and we have to be able to make money using a different approach. So we are targeting different people who may find use for that data to sort of find the resources to make this happen. So I'll leave it at that and welcome any questions that you may have. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, sir. Yes.
In IT, I know that like IT goes through, if you get value from say IT, it goes through some phases. Like at the initial stage, it can be a cost center. Then at some stage, it follows. You find IT following business strategy, and then it becomes an enabler. Have you tried to look at the different stages in which say a nation go through, such that it becomes a data-driven nation or community?
I wouldn't say we've concerned ourselves with that so much, because we know, and the reason why we've started in the geographies we've started, we know that those are data-ready geographies. Like I said, in Kenya, it is obvious. We've tested this on a set of farmers, dairy farmers. The uptake was wonderful, right? But these are people who were commercially oriented. So they saw the need for data. The cost of, say, just to give you an example, the cost of a heifer, in-calf heifer in this country is $2,500. It's even more than the US, right? And so the business of the dairy farmer is not in milk, is in heifers. Right? But when you're going to sell it, you need to have to show that it's a good animal. So people want the data, but they don't have it, right? So certain the geographies where we've gone in, they are data ready, and that's why M-Pesa is doing well and things like that, because people can appreciate that and what it can do for them. There are certain places you wouldn't even attempt to do something like this because the people are not ready for it. So I think in the places where we are, the difficulty in adoption is just that people are not used to recording. People are not used to keeping data, and that is the problem. Once we get over that, once people see the benefit of keeping the data, they will automatically take it up. So the job is on us to demonstrate, why should I keep the data? What is it? What does it benefit me? The value proposition, if we communicate it well, then the farmers will take up the recording. Yeah.
Okay, so we have one more question.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be on a panel after this, so ask all the questions. Yeah. But one more question.
Sorry? Sorry? Usomi Lulu.
Okay, let's combine that question.
Okay.
My question was, sorry to ask this in advance, but do you have a competitor, and what are you doing differently?
Yeah, there are many competitors in this space. I mean, everybody has an app that is doing something to do extension for farmers, to give marketplace things like buying stuff, inputs. People have, people like iCow, for example. They're giving information to farmers on how to do dairy better. But nobody has integrated it together, and nobody is doing real-time benchmarking. So there's no tool that is doing real-time benchmarking in the market right now. So this is the only one that we've come across. And the people we've spoken to, like, for example, we had a meeting with the FAO the other day, and they said, wow, this is wonderful. Find any project you want and plug in. Because they are looking for data. They can't find the data. And this, if it manages to collect the data, then it will solve a lot of problems from a lot of people. So yeah. I go there?
Yeah.
To the next question. Usomi Lulu. Usomi is Swahili word for scholarship, for readership, right? So when we started, our conceptualization of the problem was, how do you get farmers to bring science into their work, basically make them produce better. So it was like a problem, an extension problem initially. So we said, let farmers read science, right? So usome. Lulu is a precious, I don't know if it's called it mineral or what is it? Pearls. You know pearls? Yeah, pearls. Lulu is pearls. They're precious stones. So when we were doing this, we thought in our, we were conceited in a way. We thought this thing was very valuable to the farmers. So we call it Lulu. So usome Lulu. So that's how the name comes.
Right. Let's thank Denis again.
This kind of question about farmers reading. So apparently your approach on the farmers who could read,
Sorry?
on those customers who could read.
No, our approach was to teach farmers. So use different models to bring information to farmers.
Like how, what's the literacy level of farmers? I mean, and then you send them SMS or show them a screen with a message, like how many of them actually could read?
From my experience, a lot of the farmers can read. The farmers we're working with, they can read. There's very few farmers right now, the older farmers. If you find a farmer who's like over 60 years, those are the ones who cannot read. And even increasingly, the farmers who are on smartphone, they can read. And if they cannot read, they'll get their grandchild who's living in the house to read for them. Yeah, so it's not a problem to send them an SMS because there's somebody in the house who can read, so they can read for them. Yeah.
Okay. There are many questions people still have for Denis, and we're going to put it